Teresa Mitrovic, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
John, thank you for having me on your show.
It is a pleasure to have you. You're joining us from Australia. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the role psychological safety plays in employee retention. This is a really fun topic, one that I think is super important, not only because of the employee well-being and the psychological safety components that lead to a whole variety of other strong issues within organizations, but everything around attracting and retaining great people is really what helps organizations to be successful. So we need to create an environment of mutual accountability and trust, and that can only happen as you have psychological safety in the workplace. So this is what we'll be exploring and unpacking together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Teresa's bio with everybody. Teresa Mitrovic is the founder of ORO Collective, as well as a consultant, coach, course creator, and author specializing in performance, psychological safety, and trust. In her past life as a corporate leader, when the increasing demands of senior leadership clashed with single parenthood, coaching as a leader was the solution. With workloads reset, team cohesion and alignment gained, performance improved, and profit tripled, she has lived and worked internationally, delivering keynotes and workshops to clients large and small, and authored the book, The Currency of Connection: How Trust Transforms Life, Relationships, and Work. And I could go on and on, but I'm going to pause there. And is there anything else, Teresa, you would like to share with the audience by way of your background or personal context before we just dive on into the conversation?
So the one thing I would share is that my understanding, appreciation, and passion for psychological safety isn't purely professional, it's personal as well. So you mentioned in there that I was for a very long time a solo parent. And at the time that I was raising my son, I also was pursuing a leadership career. And those things are really hard to do, even if you do have another partner in the house. Arguably, it's harder to do with another partner in the house. But it really forces you to think about new ways to adapt to the world that you choose to have. So the way that I approach psychological safety today is based partly on what it means to be a leader who's able to achieve great outcomes with the people that they're working with. So creating this idea of performance partnership, but it's also based around our needs to be fully human, because we spend so much time at work that our work experience then naturally informs how we are as parents, as partners, as siblings, as offspring. So we've got to be really careful not to try to fragment our lives too much as employees or leaders, and then the other parts of self that we have. So when I think about psychological safety and the work that I do, it's based on this 18-year corporate leadership background, as well as my decade plus in sitting on this side of the fence, but also informed by being a parent, a partner to a neurodiverse man, and so much more.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive on in, and maybe you can explain for us what you mean by psychological safety, and then we can get into the role it plays in employee retention.
Perfect. So psychological safety is often understood as a team dynamic that's really about how comfortable and relaxed people feel about their ability to speak up without fear of judgment or ridicule or fear of being wrong. I take it down another notch and look at it in terms of what safety means and what psychological means. So psychological is about our mental and emotional landscape, and safety we all understand, right? Safety is the absence of fear. And whilst we can't ever expect as adults to live a life absent of fear, what we can do is be mindful about the things that are causing us fear and stress psychologically, so mentally and emotionally. So when I think about psychological safety, it's how do we create a sense of safety at a mental and emotional level so that people can feel that they're emotionally, their amygdala, their fear responses are dialed down so that their energy isn't spent on protection. It's spent on thinking, creativity, collaboration, connecting with others. So that's how I define it.
The reality is, when psychological safety is not present, it causes all sorts of other negative interpersonal communication, teams, behaviors that really can derail what you're trying to accomplish. And so well-meaning individuals will disagree with each other. Intelligent,
Mm-hmm.
smart, well-meaning individuals will not always see things the same way. And if you don't have a psychologically safe environment where people can express varying points of view, hash out arguments and disagreements, push each other in their thinking, check their biases, etc. If that can't happen, then you ultimately just derail your ability to be creative and innovative and drive great solutions for the market and do cool stuff in your team. And we've all been there. We've all been parts of teams where that hasn't been the case, where that safety wasn't present, where you felt like you had to self-monitor, where you had to muzzle yourself, where you had to make sure that you spent, like you said, you spent more energy trying to just navigate the politics or the dynamics of the team and saying, thinking about what you can say and can't say and all those sorts of things, that you're tiptoeing around each other rather than actually trying to move things forward. And so as we create that psychologically safe place, that then allows us to, obviously we still speak professionally, we still engage in appropriate ways, but it means that, yeah, I don't have to agree with my boss. In fact, a good boss is going to want to be challenged. They're going to want to have people push back on them. They're going to want a diverse set of ideas, and you create that environment where that can occur.
100%. Can I build on that thought for a moment? So, tension is a really important part of critical thinking and of creativity and of innovation and problem solving. And we often try to escape tension in the workplace. So when they're, as you said before, intelligent people, committed people, passionate, energetic people have diverse opinions and perspectives. And so there's naturally going to be tension in conversations, right? And it's not the tension that's bad, it's the nature of that tension. So the difference between the tension is creative or emotional, right? So the kind of tension that you and I are talking about when we're talking about those experiences that we've all had, where you feel like you've really got to edit yourself or bite your tongue, or you won't say things in a meeting, but you sure as heck will say them outside the meeting. That's emotional tension. It's a tension where we feel as though we don't, we're having to self-protect, or we sabotage others or attack or get defensive. But if we can recognize that emotional tension and take the emotion out of it by understanding what's behind it and what the thinking is and where it's coming from, then we can start to create, to evolve that into creative tension instead. And that is the kind of tension that helps us to have really great debate. It helps us to test out ideas and make sure that they're more robust and well-rounded. And it helps us to develop our critical thinking and our creative abilities as well. And also actually helps reinforce psychological safety and build trust and collaboration as well. So tension is one of the things that leaders can often get wrong. They try to avoid tension rather than harnessing it and converting it into a positive energy.
And so what does that do for retention? And we can even back up a step and talk about attracting and then retaining good people and having a really healthy team dynamic. What does all this mean for retaining good people? And why is it a problem? When we don't have psychological safety, how does that negatively impact retention in the long run?
So when I'm going to start with your final question. So how does a lack of psychological safety impact an organization? We're all aware of that old phrase that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers. And that is a reaction, at a very deep level internally, that we're so misaligned. We cannot survive there any longer. We have to exit for our own sanity or our own sense of well-being. So employee retention and psychological safety naturally go hand in hand because we are human. If we do not feel psychologically safe, we are basically in a survival mode, and there is only so long that we can exist at that level, because it's so energy intensive and it's so punishing that it automatically leads to attrition. So what it means when you have the role that psychological safety plays in retention is it gives people a voice. So when we talk about psychological safety being about someone or a team dynamic, being about being able to speak up safely and share ideas without fear of judgment, but in a way that actually creates more curiosity, what we're talking about is allowing everyone to have a voice and not making that voice wrong, just making it another voice that we will seek to understand. It also then, when someone starts speaking up, they are naturally more inclined to become more involved, become more intrinsically engaged, right? So they become more committed, because suddenly with a voice comes agency. You're actually able to do something different, because suddenly what you're saying matters. Whether or not it gets woven into a plan or a solution, you're still being heard. And all anyone really wants is to be seen, heard, and understood, right? So as long as we're listening and hearing what people are saying, then we can either integrate or kind of move on from what people have contributed. But having the ability to speak up gives people deep engagement and agency. And those two things then enable trust building, because it gives you dignity. So you've got the dignity and that helps you build your sense of self on a team, your sense of purpose on a team, helps you to define your role and the meaning that you contribute. So then you start to act from a place of collaboration. So we can only collaborate when we feel like we've got nothing to fear from other people. Right. Otherwise we're competing, right? So you cannot get to a place of genuine trust and genuine collaboration if you do not have psychological safety. What you will have instead is a very fragile sense of collaboration, which when it's put under pressure will break. And what you have is not genuine trust, but artificial trust. So again, when you need it most, it's going to crumble under pressure. So it's really, and what leaders tend to do is they tend to make some mistakes around those things. So there are some really simple errors that leaders make all the time naturally, because we tend to just kind of act from our thinking in the current moment. So if I can kind of run through some of the challenges that leaders face when they're trying to build psychological safety. One of them is we ask people to speak up and then we shut them down. And we do this all the time, right? We do this not just at work, but in conversations generally. We'll invite opinions. Someone will give us their opinion. We'll say, oh no, we did that last time, it didn't work. Or no, that's a little bit too, we don't have the budget for that. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources, manpower. A better response is to say, okay, tell me more, expand on that. Tell me what you're thinking. What would that look like? And you can even say, we've tried that before and it hasn't worked. Tell me what you're thinking about how the context has changed now. What do you see that I don't? So being curious, not judgmental, right? And that takes, let's be honest, that requires impulse control as a leader, which can be very, very difficult when we're under pressure and feeling really stressed, because we just will go to our natural responses. So one of the things leaders really need to do is take a deep breath and focus on being intentional about, actually, let's draw this out and see whether there's a solution in the thinking, not the idea they've come up with, but the thinking that got them there, because sometimes you can go deeper into it. Another mistake I see leaders making all the time is they're so time pressured and time poor and so focused on performance that they tend to think more operationally rather than strategically. So they'll be focused on the mechanisms of work, not how it's working and how their team are working. So and again, this is a stress and pressure based dynamic, but one of the things leaders can do is take some thinking time to step back from the business and say, okay, what is it that we do consistently over the course of a year? What can I do to simplify all of the things that we're doing regularly as a team? How do I create a structure that simplifies all of that and keeps us really closely aligned, really on point with whether we are making progress, whether we're succeeding or not, and how we course correct. So making sure that you've got this really clear roadmap for every year that gives you deep clarity, helps a team understand how to align around the shared goals, but also the role that they play individually within the team to achieve those goals, but also has regular touch points for one-to-ones with individuals, but also regular touch points to look at team feedback around how the team are performing, but also how they're achieving against the goals that they've set out for themselves and each other. So those are kind of a couple of things that I see leaders doing all the time. The final, three mistakes I see leaders making all the time internationally is trying to hold people accountable without first creating a psychological contract that gives them permission to do so. And what I mean by that is when you hold someone accountable after the fact to a set of expectations that you never made clear in the first place,
right?
It doesn't sound like course correction. It sounds like blame and judgment, and it comes across a lot more blunt. So you lose the ability to use feedback as a development tool, and it sounds more punitive. So the challenge there for leaders is to look at the team's work together and say, what are feedback mechanisms that we need to put in place? But equally, how do we set up expectations around the work that the team are doing together so that everything is clear? People know what's expected of them. They know how much wiggle room there is and where they've got free thinking space to be able to achieve in whatever way feels most effective and efficient for them. But knowing that you've got touch points that are early and often so that you can check how the team, so you've got these little pulse points where you can check how the team are performing and where they might need additional direction or coaching or mentoring or resources. But you really need, as leaders, we all need to be setting up the psychological contract around this is what performance looks like. And here is my role in it, in terms of being alongside you to provide the direction, support, access, and coaching that you need. And here is your role in it. And then making it easy to catch up regularly to check on how everyone's doing.
So many gems there. I've seen all of those problems that you just outlined. Again, regardless of intention, right? I think most leaders are well-intentioned. I think most leaders don't get up in the morning thinking, how am I going to take advantage of or exploit my people today? How am I going to create an unsafe environment for them where nobody wants to contribute? Like, nobody does that. Everyone gets up with good intentions and wants to have, well functioning, well running, high functioning teams. The problem is our human nature gets in the way, and just the busyness of work and of life gets in the way. And so then people end up cutting corners or just kind of falling into the same traps over and over again. Nothing you said just a minute ago was rocket science. I mean, it's all kind of basic stuff, but yet we fall into the same traps over and over again. So I often say, not zooming out now and not just talking about psychological safety, but just talking about leadership generally. Leadership is not rocket science, but it is really hard. And the reason why it's really hard is because you have to do simple things and execute them well and do them consistently over time, repeatedly. And that is hard to do.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. There's this trust model that talks about the 4 different C's of trust, and consistency is one of them. So being able to consistently behave in a certain way and it's really hard when you've got so many things going on around you and so many demands on you as a leader, and particularly when you I was going to say, you're working with external stakeholders, often internal peers or stakeholder groups. You've also got the people that you're reporting up to or the board, and then you've got your team. So as a leader, it's almost like you're an island who has all of these different stakeholder groups that you have a different responsibility and commitment to. And so you're juggling all of that, whilst at the same time, as is true, I think, for all of us, having deep pressure put on you in terms of performance outcomes. So being able to be intentional and precise and consistent in your thoughts and your words and your actions can be incredibly difficult. And that's why I mentioned the idea of impulse control, because when you're stressed, instinct kicks in and you will respond from a place of habit. And over time, with enough intentionality and consistency and practice, you will get to a place where the instinct that kicks in is around curiosity, not judgment. It is around performance partnership, not command and control. But you need a good 3 to 6 months of practicing that to be able to really feel like you can hold it down in moments when you're under high pressure. But I agree with you. Most leaders, want to have a positive impact. They want a team that's happy, high functioning, engaged, committed, trustworthy. But no one's taught them how to do that. Most leaders have learned how to lead and manage by default based on what they have felt works and doesn't work in the past with the teams that they've led or the people who have led them. So often we pick up some really bad habits, and no one ever peels back the onion and says, okay, so put aside everything that you know for a moment and, imagine, and I remember saying this to one client once, imagine if you were coming into your role brand new with all of the experience and knowledge that you had about the business, the people inside it, the demands on the business, the expectations of you, how would you design your workload and your team's workload going forward based on what you know, not what you've been doing? And even that can be a really great exercise to do, to think about, well, actually, how do I change the way that we're working and the way that we are the way that we deliver our work, but also the way that we work together, so that we are making this not just effective from an output perspective, but also really effective from a team integration and team collaboration perspective, and critical thinking as well. I think one of the things that we don't talk to leaders and managers enough about is the role of developing critical thinking and creativity in your team as well. We're often so focused on the output that we don't focus on the input and the stuff that's actually creating the quality of that output.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, to reconnect back to how we started, people want to work, especially when it's a tight labor market and people have options. And, I even with all the tech layoffs and all that happening right now, really great people are still in high demand. And so people have options. And if I'm going to go into free agency and then go and work and choose to work for an organization, I want to work for places where not only do I have a good boss that treats me well with dignity and respect, but where I have a dynamic team. I want to go places where I have opportunities for growth and improvement. And I want to go to a place where the values and purpose align with my values and purpose. And psychological safety becomes the foundation for all of that. And so if you don't have it, then you essentially erode the ability to really get great people. And you might trick people in the short term. You might be able to put on a facade and people come because they think you're a great place to work, but your reputation will precede you. And it doesn't take long for word to get out that you're actually a pretty crummy place to work. And then the good people will leave, and then you won't get good people to fill in the gaps. And so really, if you want a good pipeline of great talent, you have to start with psychological safety, that foundation of mutual accountability and trust. You have to make sure that these things are clearly communicated, where you know your people and have the opportunity to have those ongoing conversations and that dialogue. All of that will lead to greater levels of psychological safety and greater levels of retention, which ultimately, of course, drive a whole slew of other positive outcomes for organizations. And you ultimately bring more value to the market, and you're relevant as an organization, and you grow, and you're able to do great things. And that's what everyone wants.
Absolutely. And psychological safety, when you work it into not just your leadership behaviors and your team dynamics, when you work it into the systems in your business as well, that's when you start to really lock in the idea of psychological safety from an organizational perspective. Because if you just leave it at the leadership level, then you are reliant on your leaders and their impulse control, their intentionality, their ability to connect and build trust. So it's really important at an organizational level to think about it across multiple levels, not just at the team level or the leadership level, but also at the systemic level as well, and equally right down to the level of individual. Because when an employee joins an organization, so even if an organization has a great reputation like Google had, and people know it to be a psychologically safe, very kind of engaged environment for employees, it really comes down to your relationship with the manager and the team that you're working with, what your experience looks like, because we each enter into a new job with this psychological contract in place, right? We have an understanding and an expectation, just as our team members and our boss does. If that isn't made explicit, and we don't, that's not all transparent, then there is a risk that psychological contract will be broken. And I've said to people in the past, our employee engagement is never higher than the day that we walk through that front door. And then give us 6 months, give us 6 to 12 months, and our employee engagement will suddenly start to drop to around 70%. Now, when we're doing employee engagement surveys and we've got 70% response rate, we shouldn't be excited. We should see that as 30% of employees don't even care enough to tell us what they're thinking or how they feel about it, right? So what we've got to look at is it's not just how do we create this great organizational brand around the way that we treat our employees, psychological safety being at the heart of that, but how do we continue that? Like, so how do we take this person who's going to walk in with 100% engagement? How do we onboard them really well so that they know that, to your point, they know that there is going to be career growth for them or learning and development that's going to support them in their career growth, whether it's internally or externally, because the outcome of it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are feeding and nourishing someone's mind and behavior, because whilst they are at your place of work, they're going to be giving the fruits of that labor to you. But how do you onboard people really well so that they know that the psychological contract that they had is being met? And how do you as a leader build a relationship with each employee once they join to help reinforce that, so that you're building psychological safety, which then enables trust, which then unlocks this level of performance that is beyond anything that we normally experience in a command and control environment.
Yes, absolutely. Teresa, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Sure. So you can find out more about me by connecting with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the fastest way to see what I do and how I work. But I've also got a special offer for the listeners of Human Capital Innovations as well, which is a heavy discount on a couple of online courses that help leaders understand how to build psychologically safe, trust-based systems internal to their organization. So one course is Performance Partnership Playbook, which is all around how to create performance partnership as a leader. The other course is 30-day team reset, which is how do you, if you're a leader who's like, I want to see the results, how do you pick something up and create impact, so performance traction, but culture change inside of 30 days. And that course, so both of those courses are available online, and I've got a special offer for listeners on the page. So it's www.orocollective.space/human capital innovations. So I think you'll be popping that in the show notes. But do go and check that out, because again, you'll get more insights into how I work, what I do. But the final thought that I would like to leave everyone with around psychological safety is that psychological safety isn't the cherry on top. It's one of the core ingredients that goes into a successful organization, a successful team, a successful work experience. So organizational safety is there, whether we're paying attention to it or not. And it's such a core human need, particularly when there is so much uncertainty and so much change and volatility around us all the time. So the more we can create psychological safety in our workplaces as leaders, the more value we're creating, not just for our employees and our teams in the organization, but also for the lives that our employees have outside of the organization as well. So psychological safety is an essential, fundamental part of being human. It's not a theoretical cherry on top kind of an idea. It's absolutely fundamental, and it is game changing, and we need it. It affects all areas of our lives, and we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, well said. Teresa, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage my audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Teresa can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day.